But have you ever heard the story of Alexander and the horrible, terrible, not good, very bad day? If you haven't, let me tell you some about it. Alexander was a boy about the age of 7 or 8, and he had one of those days where everything was going wrong. It was one disaster right after another. Nothing was right. It was a horrible, terrible, not good, very bad day. For instance, when Alexander woke up in the morning, he discovered that he had gone to bed with gum in his mouth, and he woke up with it in his hair. When he got out of bed, he tripped over his skateboard. He dropped his sweater in the sink while there was water running into it. He said, I just knew that it was going to be a horrible, terrible, not good, very bad day. And then he went to school, and it turned out that it was even horrible there as well. After school, he had a terrible experience at the dentist office. He came home for supper, and he said, we had cauliflower for supper, and I hate cauliflower. And on the TV, all I saw was hugs and kisses, and I hate hugs and kisses. He goes on and says, then my bath water was too hot, and I got soap in my eyes, and I lost my marble down the drain. When I went to bed, Nick took back the pillow that he said I could have, and my Star Trek night light burned out. I bit my tongue, and the cat decided to sleep with Nick instead of me. All in all, he says, it was a horrible, terrible, not good, very bad day. Now, is it any wonder that when Alexander finally came to the end of his day, that he just sighed and he cried out, I just want to run away? Have you ever felt that way? I'm sure you have. Almost all of us had those days of anxiety, of stress, of nerve endings being frayed, and we just need to learn how to deal with them. And as I read throughout the scripture, I find that there's no formula or instant formula for spiritual maturity. A lot of people searches for one. They just want to have an experience and say a prayer and have instant spiritual maturity, but it doesn't work that way. Growth and maturity comes through stress, strain, and struggles that we have to work through as we're living this Christian life. A few years ago, Thomas Hobbes of the University of Washington and some other sociologists published their research on human stress. They listed many of the common experiences of life. They evaluated them of their impact on the mental and emotional well-being of a person, and then they rated them on a stress level. And the stress weight rating was expressed, it was called the Life Change Unit, or the LCUs. The worse the stress level was, the higher the LCU would be. For instance, getting a divorce was at a 73 LCU. Being pregnant is a 40 LCU. Remodeling a house was a 25. The stress of Christmas is a 13. And on went this list of ratings. When you learn that maybe a friend or a loved one passes away, or when you go to the doctor and you get those results back and they're not really what you want or hope them to be, or when your children grow up and they move away, or you sell your house and you move somewhere else, you change your job or you retire, all of these are LCUs. We are constantly being bombarded by LCUs. And the conclusion of the researchers was that if within 1 year's time we experience a collective total of more than 300 life-changing units, most people would not be able to handle it. They concluded that if we experience that many LCUs in 1 year's time, that most of us will have either a physical or mental or emotional breakdown. Because humanly speaking, we just can't cope with that much change. But notice there I said humanly speaking. I want to emphasize that word humanly, because our trust is in God, and God can make all of the difference in how we are able to handle the things that may happen in our life. Now, with that in mind, turn over to Psalms 46. There must have been some times in this writer's life that he just felt like he was in the pressure cooker and he just couldn't get out. So he wrote the words of this psalm that he sought to deal with the stress of his own life. In the first verse, he says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. The Hebrew word trouble there, what it means is to be pressed in. You remember the old saying, between a rock and a hard place? That's kind of what the psalmist is talking about here. When you're between a rock and a hard place, just turn to Psalms, because it ministers to us in an amazing way. When Martin Luther was surrounded by enemies, he read this psalm, and they ended up writing that great hymn, A Mighty Fortress is Our God. He saw the tremendous power of God as a bulwark never failing. Regardless of what happens in the world, there is still the strength and power and the might of God. So let me give you really quick a brief overview of this psalm, and then we'll dive into it a little bit more. There are three sections. The first section is verses 1 through 3. It deals with the changing of nature. And the psalmist is basically saying here, I will not fear. God is my refuge and my strength. And even though the world around me may be shaken, I will not fear. The second section is verses 4 through 7. It speaks of changes of society. And the psalmist is saying, I will not be moved. Even though nations are falling apart, even though societies is dwindling, I will take refuge in God. He is my strength. I will not be moved. And finally, the last section is verses 8 through 11. And the psalmist seems to just sit back after everything that he has seen in society and in nature, and he says, I will not let stress ruin my life. I'm going to relax. I'm going to change gears. I'm going to trust God and get on with living in accordance to His will. So let's go ahead and dive into that first section. Let's read verses 1 through 3. It says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountain be moved in the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble in its swelling. It's almost like the psalmist here was familiar with our modern day headlines in our newspapers and journals, don't it? Worrisome things are happening all over the world. During the past 20 years, earthquakes, tsunamis have increased at a tremendous rate. Geologists point to the San Andreas fault line and predict that one day a large chunk of Western California will fall into the Pacific Ocean. They say that the Pacific Rims, their volcanoes, are ripe for a major eruption. And what about the hurricanes that lashes our coast, the tornadoes that sweeps across states, the blizzards that paralyzes cities, the droughts that we face that destroy our farms? What about the floods that wash away bridges and homes? Some people are just crying out, what is happening in our world today? But as a Christian, how should we react to this? The psalmist is saying, I will not be afraid. My Lord is still in command of the winds and the waves and the sea and all of the elements of nature. Therefore, I will not be afraid. God is my refuge and my strength. Second section, the psalmist says, I will not be moved. Verses 4 through 7 says, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. The nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Here he's picturing nations in uproar, kingdoms falling apart, all of these great changes taking place. It sounds a lot like today, doesn't it? That's our world. Nations are in uproar. Mankind seems to be falling apart, but we as Christians don't have to be. We can stay steadfast because God is our refuge and our strength. And because Jesus is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. He is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. And as Christians, we stand strong in the faith and the commitment that we have in Jesus, who is our Lord. Thirdly, it says, I will not be filled with stress anymore. Now, for me, that's probably a lie, but that's my goal. I will not be filled with stress anymore. Then it seems like the psalmist just sits back, looks at all of these changes that has been taking place. He reflects on all of them with these words. He says, come, behold the work of the Lord, how he has brought desolation on the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bows and shatters the spears. He burns the chariots with fire. And then he goes on with verses 10 and 11. He says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Do you realize what the psalmist is saying? He's saying, in the midst of all of this, I have decided that I will no longer let my life be filled with stress and anxiety anymore. Why? Because God is my refuge, and he is my strength. I wonder if we've forgotten how to relax. I mean, how long has it been since you've sat down with your family and you ate a meal together? After the meal, you just talked, you just visited, you had fun with each other. How long has it been since you took a long walk in the evening and watched the sunset? How long has it been since you took a hot bath and you read a whole chapter in a book without any interruptions? How long has it been since you just leaned back, relaxed, listened to some good and wholesome music? How long has it been? How long has it been since you just spent a day, you just got away for yourself? You took your wristwatch off, you forgot what time it is, and did what you wanted to do, when you wanted to do it. You know, someone said that 3 words can summarize how most of us spend our life: hurrying, worrying, and scurrying. It's time for us to take the psalm at heart and be still and know that he is God. But before we close, I want to tell you 3 great truths that we can draw from this Psalms. First, God is always near and available to us. God never puts us on hold. I mean, we may be on hold on the telephone, on hold at the red light, on hold at the supermarket, but God is always available. And he's anxious to hear from us whenever we want to go to him. Some of our problems may seem superficial, but others may be deep, and God can help us with both. So talk to him. Then listen to him through his word and learn from him. Secondly, God's power is greater than anything in this world. It's greater than winds and storms or earthquakes or volcanoes. There's no greater power. God's power is sufficient to win the victory over all of our enemies. The psalmist is telling us, God is our refuge and our strength, a very present help in trouble. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Finally, God's help works even when we can't help ourselves. Let me ask, have you felt weak lately? Have you felt like there's just too many stressors in your life, too many of the LCUs in your life, and that you're just ready to explode? God's help is available. And all you have to do is reach out for it and grab it. This might not completely sound like a great Thanksgiving sermon, but honestly, what more is that than we can be thankful for than that He is our refuge and our strength. And no matter what we face in this life, we know that He's there. What greater thing to be thankful for than that? If you have a decision, come now as we stand and sing.